So I think if you told us all a few months ago that Valve would have dropped a Steam Deck refresh, you'd probably have a tough time convincing people. Like, I remember when the first Steam Deck reviews came out, a lot of people were hesitant to buy one. It was not a polished experience, it was buggy, but there was a lot of potential for its future. Valve usually never stirs up any sort of hype machine. They give you an honest introduction of what to expect and what they're delivering. And the thing you can count on from Valve has always been their commitment to support their products. Like, still, it wasn't gonna be easy, like it was unproven at this point. They were gonna have to fight all these battles before it could survive stage 1. Iron out the manufacturing and supply chain hiccups, put a ton of work into improving gaming on Linux, and then continue to do so all while optimizing the Steam Deck. And that was their goal 2 years ago. Ever since then, this platform has been tuned, updated, and refined, where initially this felt like their beta, this stepping stone to finally getting us today, which is the Steam Deck OLED. It's got a redesigned custom 6nm AMD APU, 16 gigs of upgraded lower latency RAM, a larger 1000 nit HDR 90Hz OLED display, bigger 50 watt-hour battery, improved thermals, higher quality haptics, redesigned tactile buttons and thumbsticks, upgraded 180Hz touch polling rate, Wi-Fi 6E support, a 30-gram weight reduction, same expandable storage, better Bluetooth connectivity, and upgraded DSP chip for improved sound quality, all while being easier to repair, and the prices stayed exactly the same with more storage. I know it all looks like a lot, like the upgrades sound crazy, but I think we should take a step back a bit, calm down, and look at this objectively. The thing is, this OLED model has a lot of quirks and useful features that I haven't really seen on many handhelds. Part of the reason why this video has taken a bit longer than usual. I've had a lot of thoughts after going back and forth between the LCD model and this newer model about whether or not I would personally upgrade from my existing Steam Deck, or if as a first-time buyer, which would be the better option. So before I tell you exactly what I personally ended up going with, I want to let you in on a little secret. Valve is not sending me these. I buy these with my own money. I will let you know if that ever does happen. But I originally bought the 64GB version of the LCD Steam Deck because I really wasn't sure if I was going to like the Steam Deck and I wanted to save the money. So in a similar boat with the Steam Deck OLED, I wasn't fully sure if I was going to justify this as an upgrade. I really don't like upgrading tech if it's still working fine, especially if it's still relatively new. So I waited for it to arrive before I made my decision. So first thing, and easily the biggest one for me when I took it out of the box, is this new OLED display. You know, they kept it at that 800p resolution, which was probably the biggest complaint about the Steam Deck. Any rival handhelds have had these way nicer, higher resolution, colorful displays, and that's what Valve aimed to fix. The color accuracy is much better out of the box now. You get those inky blacks, that infinite contrast, and the image separation compared to the LCD panel is another area where it excels in offering a more punchy and 3D looking image. So even though Valve did not increase the resolution of the display, the upgrade that OLED brought to the table is enough to increase the perceived clarity to your eyes. It just looks like a less hazy, clearer experience without needing to drive any more pixels than before. And remember, with any sort of revision or second generation product, you don't want to push too hard in one area where you end up crippling another. We see this all the time in a bunch of other handhelds. So by keeping the 800p display, you're not going to take that hit in performance or on battery life. And by shrinking the bezels a bit, that allowed them to keep the same form factor, and the display goes from 7 inches to 7.4 inches, which is pretty awesome. The screen has all the benefits of OLED's visuals. The panel is also 90 Hz now. Apparently you can drive this up to 120 Hz if you have a BOE display, but that's another story. So by increasing the refresh rate, all of a sudden that makes the Steam Deck feel even more fluid, like the animations, indie titles that can take advantage of the frame rate benefit greatly. And it feels faster while not necessarily getting a hardware upgrade. Now, the one interesting thing that I found initially, kind of a downside with the OLED model, is the standby time. I found that the battery life seems to be draining a bit faster with the OLED model when they're in that sleep state when you actually power it off. So that could be a variety of reasons. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't fully tested this to the extreme yet. But if I have both of these charged to 100% and leave them both sleeping on my desk, I've come back to notice the OLED seems to be losing like 5 to 10% more than the LCD model. It might have something to do with the new Bluetooth module that lets you wake the OLED from sleep with a controller now, or the faster resume time. I'm not 100% sure. But other than that, that's really the only noticeable downside with battery life on this newer model. I've really been trying to jump into the battery to see if the efficiency gains are actually noticeable. And they are, like, enough that I feel like I don't need to think about killing it as often. But of course, this greatly depends on the types of games you're playing. Valve is saying anywhere from 30 to 50% gains, which is translated to more like a couple hours in indie titles. Like if a game would get 6 before, it's getting 7, maybe 8 now. And those heavy titles are pretty mixed too. Like I'd say 45 minutes more on average. It varies a lot. So the screen also gets way brighter now, up to 1000 nits in HDR, which when you combine OLED, HDR, and the higher refresh rate on the go, it feels pretty amazing. HDR has always been a tough hurdle with Linux, so the fact that it just works now as flawlessly as it does is a showcase of how outstanding the work that the community, the KDE team, and Valve have done on the software side. Not even mentioning the additional benefits you get from using a display like this versus a traditional LCD panel, the viewing angles were immediately noticeably better. Like also, the response time is killer for anything a bit more reliant on timing. Also, pro tip, if you are going to be playing a game that's a bit more intensive to run, you could set the DeX display to 45 Hertz and take advantage of frame doubling. You're not rendering any additional frames when you're locked at 45, but you're displaying that frame twice, so you get that extra level of smoothness with the battery life gains. Valve is now including a longer charging cable in the box, and I've noticed the OLED model is pulling about 42 watts at peak, which is like twice the power draw compared to the LCD model, which is great. So you get that fast charging capability now. I actually mainly use these Ugreen Nexode Pro 100 watt chargers if I'm on the go. It's just a nice upgrade over the standard Valve charger if you are traveling with multiple devices. It's smaller because these gallium nitride charging chips allow for way more energy density. And then it also supports Samsung's super fast charging 2.0. So you can literally charge 3 devices up to 100 watts of dedicated power to a single port. So it's great if you need to charge a phone, a tablet, a laptop like a 14-inch MacBook Pro. Ugreen claims 0 to 86% in an hour of charging. There's 2 USB-C ports and 1 USB-A port, and the entire thing fits perfectly in the back of the Steam Deck case. So shout out to Ugreen for being cool enough to sponsor this video, and I'll have all their stuff linked down below. Okay, so now I want to talk about the actual improvements on the control side of things. It looks very minor. It may not seem like a massive difference, but this is an area where I feel like Valve has definitely improved the experience. The buttons all feel a bit less mushy, like they reduce the travel time by a tiny bit, especially on these front buttons. The thumbsticks also have this concave surface now with a ring that protrudes a bit more, so I didn't find myself slipping off compared to the old ones, which these little grip caps were a great upgrade. The trackpad's also slightly raised and the haptics feel tighter. Like whatever haptic motor adjustment that was made to these is absolutely noticeable. Now I have heard from a few people that the existing D-pad was always a bit difficult to hit any sort of diagonal movement with, like if you're playing fighting games. I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but I feel like I've had an easier time with the OLED model hitting these moves, but the new D-pad feels really similar, like not that big of a difference. The shoulder buttons are way better. Like this is an area where you really feel a difference between the way looser shoulder buttons on the original Steam Deck and the weight reduction. 30 grams is what Valve is saying, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a pretty big difference when you're schlepping this thing around a lot. I mean, obviously this one has a case, so it's gonna be a little bit heavier, but it's enough of a difference where you can feel it. They were able to save some space by going with the OLED display, which meant for more room for upgraded thermals, battery space. They even added metal screw boxes for the Torx screws, so you don't wear them out nearly as much compared to the plastic frame. You also have great compatibility with the existing Steam Deck accessories, like I believe the kill switch case should work, the JSOX accessories should work, and the grip caps. A little bit tighter, but other than that, you can even transfer over existing SSDs if you just want to. I think you just need a firmware update and you should be good to go. So doesn't sound like a bunch of crazy upgrades on paper, but enough to see a noticeable difference when it comes to like the physical aspects of the Steam Deck OLED. Now, how do these improvements all translate to the actual gaming experience? Well, that's what really hooked me in, especially at night. The LCD Steam Deck still works fantastic at night, don't get me wrong. But since the system is now even more efficient and runs cooler, the fans don't happen to ramp up as much. And when they do, it's more like a breeze of air than a harsh whine. Plus, obviously, the lack of backlight bleed and the fact that you can dim down the display even further, which ends up making this like the perfect nighttime gaming device. So now I want to address a concern that I see all the time in the comments, which is, should I get a matte display or should I get a glossy display. It's not as big of a deal as you think. I've always been an advocate for glossy displays, especially on OLEDs, because normally by adding a light diffusion layer, you do get less reflections, but you pay for it by muting the colors and fuzzing up the clarity. Valve is using etched glass in this case, which is different from standard matte anti-glare coatings, which usually, again, isn't a top pick for OLED because those coatings can end up diffusing any fine lines and you can end up reducing the image quality. So from what I've seen, only comparing a matte OLED to a glossy LCD, the differences between etched glass and glossy are pretty minimal other than the way they handle reflections. Like at no point have I felt like you're losing out by not having a glossy display. I would actually say the opposite. Having the diffusion is huge if you do travel a lot with your Steam Deck and face the rougher outdoor lighting conditions. The matte will probably be the better choice. There are a few cases where I do see a bit less contrast on a matte display in specific lighting scenarios where a glossy display will just end up looking like a mirror anyways. So it's not as big of a deal, more like personal preference and where you're gonna end up using these anyways. All right, now all that said and done, I wanna talk about how all these features contribute to performance. It's still not gonna be the fastest device out there. I think we all know this at this point, but this new smaller 6nm APU really pulls its weight at being essentially the most efficient chip I've ever used in a handheld. The gains are pretty slight. Like once in a while, you'll see a few FPS in some scenarios. Everyone's games will be different. It does wake and resume games a bit faster. The power button now has this WRGB status light. It also downloads games way quicker since it supports Wi-Fi 6E. And really, any game looks absolutely fantastic on this display. It's one of those areas where emulation visuals look better, indie games happen to look better, and then of course those big, heavier titles can take advantage of OLED. Like if you play Cyberpunk on this thing, you can really notice it. Really, anybody coming from the older existing LCD display will be able to appreciate the OLED display. It's like Valve took a wish list of the top requested features from the community and actually listened and delivered, which is something pretty rare nowadays. You know, they are a private company that essentially dominates the digital gaming market, so it allows them to get away with things that other companies can't. And it's great to see them as an ally for pro-consumer rights, all while dropping these revisions without insane price increases and actual value on the table. So the question about whether or not it's worth the upgrade is obviously subjective. If you are perfectly happy with your existing LCD deck, I would say carry on. Just because this new OLED model comes out does not necessarily mean that these awesome handhelds are all of a sudden redundant. So if you do see a feature on this that you feel like would be a substantial upgrade to you, I'd say you'd probably be happy with the upgrade. And if you are on a tighter budget, maybe unsure about Steam Decks like I was, it's a killer time to jump on an older LCD deck, whether it's refurbished, eBay, or you could always save up a bit and just jump to the OLED platform. But yeah, a seriously awesome product just got even better. So I'm gonna end up hanging on to my existing model and I'll keep this one around for all the existing videos, but that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll have all links to accessories and all the Steam Deck goodies down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.